It is our pleasure to be joined by the foremost leaders in Florida State football podcasting. Bud Elliott and Ingram Smith are in the house. Everyone knows the Nolecast. Everyone knows. Boys, this is a first in the history of this podcast. We've done some home and homes. We have never done it all in one spot. So we'll see how it goes. How we doing?
It's the Neutral Site podcast, is what it sounds like. Absolutely. No, appreciate you guys having us on. Exciting to be able to join you, and excited to look forward to a Cheez-It Bowl. Absolutely. So we'll get into some good conversation today.
Are you guys coming down for it?
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
Okay. Now, it's not the normally OU will go down. We'll do some TV, like some practice reports throughout the week, building up in the game. Turns out the budget gets cut a little bit when you go 6-6, bud.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, we're going to sit you down day before the game. And
if the wives like Jake Owen, though, the country western singer, I know they're having a free Jake Owen concert downtown that Ingram's involved with the day before the ball game.
Ooh.
Nice.
So yeah,
okay.
So we'll shoot that information over to you. But absolutely,
I like that. That's great news.
Bud's just promoting 90 seconds into the podcast. Hat tip to you, sir. Thank you. Brilliant.
Hey, we all know what is here. So the way we're going to do this, we're going to talk Florida State, and then we'll talk Oklahoma after that. So I'll just start with this, guys. It seems like some patience that Florida State showed with Mike Norvell's paying off, right? 3-6, 5-7, and now 9-3 with this football team finishing really, really strong. Like what has the vibe around the program been like this season? Because it seems like things are headed in a really good direction.
You know, I don't know that FSU would have made the coaching change when they did, had they known that COVID was coming like 5 weeks later, right? And that really, in my opinion, put Mike behind the 8 ball as a coach. And I think you talk to anybody that took over for a 2020 season, they would probably tell you, like, it made it hard. You're installing your stuff over Zoom, right? And there's a lot of different things, like you're trying to hire coaches. I don't think, like, Mike didn't hire a whole lot of guys with Florida connections at first, which, if you believe in your guys as recruiters, that shouldn't be a big deal because they can go out there and make those connections. But if you're literally limited by rule, unless you're Arizona State, you're not really allowed to do a whole lot of recruiting on the road. It can impact you a little bit. So it did take a little time, I think, for him to get his culture installed. But like if you watched him at Memphis, or even when he was the OC at Arizona State, the guy is generally going to score points. And this year they got the defense playing a little better. They had to stay healthy at some key spots and did, and they also had some really nice hits through the transfer portal. I mean, it's probably the best team they've had since that 2016 Orange Bowl team against Michigan.
How's the hierarchy looking? Florida seems like an interesting state. Like for us, we have Oklahoma State. The hierarchy is set, and it's like that in a bunch of places. But it feels like Florida, and maybe I'm wrong, but between Miami, Florida State, and Florida, there's like this constantly reshuffling of kind of what the trendy team is or what the cool place to go is with the recruits. Like, what does that look like right now?
You're right. There is a amount of fluidity in kind of the hierarchy in the state of Florida that I'm not sure you see anywhere else, as far as 3 main players. And no, Florida is certainly the older university and kind of the more old line power of the institutions, but hasn't necessarily separated itself from Florida State or Miami. And also, all 3 schools are living in a world where, for the first time that I can remember, where the top talent in Florida isn't necessarily going to either of those 3 schools. And so, not only are you fighting to get back on the higher end of the totem pole, you're also trying to figure out which of you is going to be able to start keeping, the 5 better kids in state, which you just haven't seen for the past 4 or 5 years for the most part. So it's a different state with the dynamics of the institutions, and we're not talking Oklahoma State. We're not talking Georgia Tech. We're talking 3 schools that can all point to a pretty significant, rich history. But all 3 schools are having to live in a world where, the kids out of Broward County or Tampa or Orlando, wherever the talent may be in the state this year, is just as likely to go to Georgia or Alabama or Clemson as they are either of those three schools.
It's interesting. Like FSU finished third in terms of high school recruiting this year within the state. So if you're a Gator fan or a Florida fan, you're like, hey, yeah, you're beating us now. We'll beat you down the line. And I think FSU fans counter is like, hey, this team should probably be a lot better next year too. So you got another beatdown coming. And we'll see how Norvell recruits with a full year of decent results to sell. Throughout this whole offseason, I mean, you go pull up ESPN or CBS, Norvell was pretty high up there on the hot seat things. And we didn't think that was justified. And, if you check our YouTube channel, we're like, guys, FSU's not interested in having 3 head coaches in a 5-year span. Like, they're not going to be axing these dudes after every 2 years. Taggart was kind of a unique circumstance that they really felt they had to move on from. Like, traditionally, Bobby Bowden coached 30 years, right? So they're not really maybe as reactive as people think. Like, they're not Auburn. And so I do think that a lot of other schools, though, used these hot seat, reports out there against them. Like, their junior day was poor. They didn't get a lot of good kids up there in junior day last February. I think we're both looking at how do they do this year, right? But on the field, I think they have a much better roster than those two schools right now.
Yeah, as I watch them, I mean, they've got, and it's Florida State. They've always had talent. The issues, in my opinion, over the last couple of years have been, at the line of scrimmage, most notably the offensive line, but they got dudes running all over the place. But let's start with Jordan Travis. I know there's a lot of excitement already because he announced he's coming back to Florida State next season. Throughout this season, how much improvement have you seen from Jordan Travis, and what level is he playing at coming into this game?
He's playing at a level that honestly I think is unfair to future quarterbacks. I mean, his development has been at an arc that I don't think you can expect from other people. For the most part, Gabe, and I'm not a quarterback expert, just somebody that's been fortunate enough to follow and watch college football for a long time, but for the most part, a quarterback and his arm is more or less that. Now, you can get better throwing certain routes, and there's areas where you can improve, but the amount of improvement from the passing standpoint, both the decision making and literal improvement on the ball being delivered, is unlike anybody I've ever seen before. I mean, Jordan's always a talented athlete. I think literally the first time he touched the ball in the bowl game, he took it 52 yards on a QB sweep, more or less. So you knew what the raw product was there. I just don't think anybody with any sort of reasonable based idea could have extrapolated that this is where, to the point that he would get as a passer.
And it kind of makes you wonder, like, would you have seen it earlier had he not always been hurt throughout his career? Like, he never had a season that he played, 500-600 snaps even. He was always just getting banged up. This year, he only missed, like, I think 2 quarters, the second half of that Louisville game. It's a super athletic family. Like, his brother's the second baseman for the Blue Jays, or was, So like we knew that the dude was a really good athlete. I think this year the main thing is he's just not putting the ball in jeopardy. I mean, he threw 320 passes and 4 picks, which is a pretty nice ratio. And if you look at like PFF, his like interceptable rate is really low. Like, there's not a lot of times where we can point to and say, oh, they got lucky because they dropped that should have been picked. He just doesn't really put the ball in harm's way. And when you got a dude with legs like that who has been throwing the ball pretty well, and Norvell schemes up a lot of wide open stuff too. Like, that's been consistent really since he was at Memphis when they were battling UCF back in the day. It's a nice combo to have.
One of the things that, Gabe, I don't know about you, but I've frequently heard since the matchup was announced, which right away I was like, oh boy, did they give us a bad matchup for all the things that we have not been good at? But there's been a lot of people saying, well, yeah, Florida State, they're on a good trajectory, but their record, they didn't really beat anyone. And you look at their 3 losses, and those are their toughest games, and they couldn't get over on any of those. How did those, tell us how those games actually played out, and is that a fair assessment or not? Was it a weak schedule, or what was, like, kind of how did all that fall into place?
I think it's fair to say that it was a weak schedule. I also think it's fair to say that maybe in the year 2022, if you've got decent culture and a balled-in locker room, you're gonna have a better chance to win a lot of these back half of the season games than some programs out there. I mean, we'll just have to see what it looks like, but you certainly benefited from playing some of the teams that you did. I'm not going to make them out to be super talented or juggernauts by any means, but you also saw a consistent progression and buy-in from a team and improvement at a level that, like we said with Jordan, is hard to really believe. So I think part of that's true, Teddy. I think it's very fair to say that, particularly the last 5 teams they played, Florida being the strongest of them, but he didn't get a whole lot of pushback in the other 4 in that back half of the season where they kind of got things corrected after losing 3 in a row.
I also think, like, go back to that game at Louisville, right? I know I'm sitting there. I had instant reaction duty that night. Like, man, going to the halftime, you lost Jared Verse, who's projected as like a top 2 round pick. Fabian Lovett, your bestie tackle, got hurt against LSU. He wasn't playing. You'd lost Robert Scott, who's your left tackle. You're on your 3rd string right tackle now. The kid they luckily brought in with their last scholarship from South Carolina, who's a backup on the Gamecocks. And Jordan goes down. Ooh, this is a good team when they got healthy guys, but like you're going to find out real quick how good these backups are. And Boston College next week was kind of a blessing because BC was really, really banged up, and BC had to switch some guys from D line to O line. Like, that's not a great midweek thing to have to do at this level. But you were definitely your least healthy in that Wake Forest, NC State, Clemson stretch. And I feel like if you had been able to spread out the injuries some, you probably still go 5-0 down the back stretch. You may not win, you may not beat these teams by 35 or 40, but you also might have been able to pull out a win or two in terms of the close game type stuff in those games you lost. If you have some of your more impact line of scrimmage guys.
Looking at this offense as a whole, as I've watched it, it seems like Norvell and Atkins. Yeah, there's a lot of talk about Jordan Travis and what he can do, but seems like they want to run the damn ball. I mean, you look at it, 200 yards rushing in 7 straight games. Is that kind of where they want to start everything is with that run game, guys?
Certainly been historically, it's been a centerpiece of Mike Norvell's offenses always. And if you're a running back, obviously I'm unbiased here, or I am biased, but that would be the place where I think historically they'll start to recruit pretty well, because they can be able to point to success and being able to point to getting guys that aren't necessarily, and Trey Benson's a high level recruit and an exceptionally high level athlete, but I don't know that you necessarily need to have like a 5-star top 3 back in the country in this type of offense to have a whole lot of productivity. And I think you're absolutely right, Gabe. That is what everything is based around. And that is, Mike has historically worked with wide receivers, but what his offense is really geared to is finding situations in the run game where you can consistently take advantage of it.
You're across the line, like they're a pretty heavy counter team. They'll run some outside zone. Jordan keeps the backside pretty honest, obviously, because like he's probably still your best playmaker with the ball in his hands. They definitely hit on the Benson kid, as Ingram noted. Like, he didn't get any touches really at Oregon. He had a pretty serious injury at the end of his high school career. I tend to think Florida State had some workout data on him before they said yes to him coming as a transfer, and like that has just been a huge hit.
You sure they didn't just get eyes on his ass and hamstrings and they're like, yeah, we'll take that guy.
So they liked him at Memphis, right? Because like that was the recruiting class that Mike was working on before he got the job, and then he got hurt. And I mean, there's got to be questions like he didn't really play at Oregon, but it was a serious knee injury that he had to come back from. So sometimes that stuff just does take time, and they're like, oh, okay, this is a hit. This is good. Center is pretty undersized, but quick. They seem to not make a whole lot of mental mistakes up front. Both guards are pretty big. Your tackles are kind of built like guards, but they do pull them a lot. And tight end there's a reason they took 2 tight ends in the portal already, right? So it's not necessarily a strength, but receiver wise is where they're the most better this year by far. Like they probably had. I got some heat for saying it was the worst receiving core in the ACC, but it was definitely like bottom third last year. And then you go and you get Johnny Wilson, who's a 6'6" type kid, Micah Pittman, who a lot of people are like, how's he going to fit culture wise? And has come in and honestly just blocked his butt off. I don't know if we can cuss on here, but I mean, just been a really good possession guy. good blocking on screens. And then I think we've all played with dudes who just finally clicked at some point, and Ontario Wilson is kind of their deep threat who's just finally putting it together, on the outside. So their receiving core this year has to be respected in a way that really has not been in several years.
I want to hear about this defense. You always see Florida State has dudes all the way 3 levels, always have good edge guys, tough, big defensive tackles, backers that can run, and secondary players. Always feels like Florida State has just some of the most physical guys out there. How's this group stacked up? It looks like they've made massive improvement year over year to what they put out there this season.
It is a significantly better group. I think of all the just like the most talented, physically gifted player out there is probably a transfer from Albany. I mean, Jared Verse is going to play in the game, the bowl game, and is still making the decision as to whether or not to return to school. But that is a guy who is projected anywhere from, the 3rd round to the 1st round, depending on where you look. And that is, of the more traditional Florida State kind of eye-popping, physically gifted defenders, I'd start the conversation there. Tatum Bethune is a linebacker that they pulled from UCF. He is not necessarily the most wildly physically gifted guy, but just a fantastic college linebacker and a solid addition who played through an injury this year. The other kid that they have at linebacker who's really given them a high level of play is Kalen DeLoach. DeLoach is perhaps slightly undersized, but a guy that can run exceptionally well, and a guy that has blossomed into a really pretty above average linebacker over the past 2 years. Secondary's had its moments of strength and weakness. I don't know that there's anybody back there that's just transcendently gifted from a physical standpoint. But Jamie Robinson is a safety who plays with the field in front of him, reacts well, may not run a 4.39 or something like that, but is a really heady player and has given a lot of kind of smarts and football sense to the backside or back part of that defense.
I definitely think the defense is improved from what it was last year, but I also still have questions about this group, and personnel wise, Ingram nailed it. But you look at who they've played, and I really have a lot more questions about the offenses that they played down the stretch than the defenses. So Georgia Tech was playing a 3rd-string quarterback. Miami ran out Van Dyke, and I'm kind of shocked that they did, and he re-injured his throwing shoulder on a non-contact injury. Like, he literally looked like a baseball guy blowing his arm out. That's not that doesn't look good. And so he was out after like the 1st or 2nd series. Syracuse, they physically overwhelmed, and that was kind of the Syracuse team they got was kind of the Syracuse team that I kind of thought they would get like throughout the whole year, but Q stayed healthy for the first couple games and won some close ball games. And as their attrition mounted, their depth is kind of what we had heard at ACC Media Day. Like, Q's didn't have dudes. UL Lafayette actually lost their quarterback like the week of the game. And then Florida put up points on them. And I think it's fair to note, like, the teams that can chuck it around a little bit and have competent quarterback play, LSU didn't really go up and down the field on them until FSU's prevent defense was kind of a joke, and they gave up like 180 yards and 2 scores in the last 2 minutes. But, Louisville put up 31, right? Clemson put up 34. Florida put up 38. I think it's fair to question, like, if they play teams with a pulse offensively, can they be got? And like, they don't really play zone very well on the back end. You're going to get a lot of man-to-man. And, I feel like they don't communicate this stuff super well. So, like, there are points to be had if you can block them up front. If Verse and Lovett and those guys are eating, Lovett's their best D tackle. He's probably back half of the draft guy, but like one of the guys in this defense that, you got good college players and you got guys that are like, all right, that guy's got some NFL tools to him. He'll probably get picked. If those guys are getting home and they're not having to blitz you, obviously most people's coverage is pretty good, at that point.
You guys mentioned that, and we probably should have started with this question. Everyone's playing for Florida State, right? Like, this is you never know coming into these bowl games now, guys, but I had read a lot of stuff that this team, they're very motivated by getting double-digit wins. So is it everybody is planning on playing it from up to this point?
Yeah, everybody's planning on playing. There may be one or two more kids that'll enter the portal. I don't know that those are necessarily guys that we would have talked about otherwise in this conversation. But yeah, I mean, quite honestly, there's guys playing in this game that I'm surprised they're playing. Jamie Robinson is one of them. Jared Verse is another one. Now Verse still has a decision to make as to whether or not he's returning. I'm just still surprised to see somebody of that level playing in the Cheez-It Bowl, to be perfectly honest with you. So to our knowledge, every piece of the roster is playing that is, I don't know if of significance is a fair phrase to use about kids, but the people that we would have highlighted in these conversations or mentioned is committed to playing in the bowl game.
What's been the main change for that culture wise? Because that's impressive to pull off in this day and age, especially for the Cheez-It Bowl. And he had a rough start. Like you mentioned, coming in during COVID, and I can't exactly remember the details, but something went on there early on between him and the players, and it felt like he lost the team out of the gate, but somehow has culturally wise and just whatever they've done there, they've gotten everyone back.
And look, they started 0-4 last year, right? And you're like, man, this is
with the worst loss in program history.
Yeah, they lost to Jacksonville State, not Dion's Jackson State team, Jacksonville State, which is more like North Alabama. I think like Mike really did a nice job of instilling his culture, and like the guys think that he loves them, and really like they do play hard for one another. You don't see this team take a lot of reps off, and that I don't think that was always the case in year one, right? Like and he kind of stuck with the guys that wanted to be there and work hard. And early on, when you're building your culture, you got to be not afraid to sort of jettison some guys that maybe don't want to have the buy-in, right? Because they're not going to be there in the long term. And if you're doing your job right as a coach, you will, even if it means some of the guys who are talented maybe not buying in. Like you got to be okay with them leaving. I think it says something like some of these dudes who are part of this rebuild have only been there for 1 year, right? Like Jared Verse is playing. He's not one of these guys that's missed a bowl game each of the last 3 years, although they have obviously. Like that he's playing, I think does say something. So it's a lot of it's culture, man. Like they really do seem to care about him.
Looking at the expectations for this game, right? It seems like everyone thinks that FSU is going to win this game comfortably. And when you look at it on paper, I completely understand why. But what do you think could prevent that from happening? Like how could this game play out to where OU is in the fourth quarter, has the ball, chance to go win the game? Has there been a common theme in the Florida State losses other than kind of the injuries that you talked about?
Yeah, I think defense, right? Like it's hard to blow somebody out if you're not getting stops, right? Florida was missing, I think, 5 of their top 6 receivers in that game. And you had one dude that you had to know was the guy that you had to worry about. And the kid had 180 yards on you. I think that the rest of the receivers had one target. Wasn't it Ingram? It was like one target for all the rest of these third stringer walk-on receivers. And they just kept finding ways to get their one guy, Ricky Pearsall, is probably like a 6th, 7th round type guy open on you. So, I mean, this is definitely sort of a defensive staff. Now would be a good time to to show a pulse for the first time all year against the decent, offenses that you face. Because they really have, there's a stats term for this, but they have beaten up on bad and they've kind of been beaten up by good. Like there has not been a whole lot of middle ground. So I have a hard time seeing Florida State lose this game like 20-17. If Oklahoma went nuts offensively and won 45-42, I don't think that's crazy to think. I don't think it's going to happen, but I think if that's how they lose, that's how I would project it to go down.
I would say for me, Gabe, and I don't know about you, like the biggest concern, for offensively for Oklahoma, in order to go out and have a night like that, is going to be the offensive line. We're going to have 3 starters down. Left tackle, who's an absolute stud, maybe late first, early second type of player. Missing our starting right tackle and missing our center. So, and there's not a lot of guys behind them that have a whole lot of experience. And you throw in the fact that our 1,000-yard back is going to be gone too. It makes things all of a sudden become very difficult offensively. So, I don't know. I guess, we've got some good young talent and they've got some time to prepare for a bowl, but I don't know that I see a big night for Oklahoma offensively, even though, like, as you lay it out, there may be some opportunity there. And I don't know if you saw my reaction whenever you said we're going to get a lot of man coverage, because that has not been something that we've been good at beating this year.
Is Mims playing? He is, right? Okay.
As
As
far
we
as
know.
I know. I mean, he's practicing.
Can we guess at who the Cheez-It Bowl guys are? Because, like, I don't know if you've seen this, but you have 2 Cheez-It Bowl, and I guess one for each team. I don't really know who it is for FSU yet. Like,
I don't think you're going to like this, but OU's punter has quite the following on YouTube. I think he's been lobbying pretty hard.
Okay.
And I think he told Cheez-It he's going to vlog it, which
okay. So I wonder.
I don't know if he's going to end up being the guy, but we'll see. He's made it known that he wants to be in that ridiculous room. That is I like that Cheez-It's doing that, though. It's fun.
Micah Pittman, Florida State wide receiver, is a little bit of a YouTube persona as well, and I wonder if that doesn't end up being Florida State's representation from that side as well. If nothing else, a good chance for those two to cross promote each other's platform. So may they be so fortunate. But no, Gabe, I did want to ask you about. I mean, and Teddy, you referenced it there with Harrison out, and Wanye Morris is a kid that some Florida State fans will still be familiar with from the recruitment side of things. And Gray not being available either. But
Wanye was in that class that Jimbo stopped recruiting, and then they got mad that we reported, because remember, like Pat Surtain was like, "Hey, I haven't talked to my kid in a while," and it was like, "Oh, something may be happening here. This is kind of weird." Like, #1 corner in the country.
Wanye was what 2017, 2018
that was the same
class, I guess.
Right? Yeah, it had to be.
Yeah, I believe so. Was Wanye committed to Florida State as a sophomore or something, or maybe a heavy? I just know that was
either publicly or quietly. He was
they were involved with him. Anyway, good prospect. Sounds like he turned into a hell of a player for you guys.
Jimbo just turned it off. He just shut it down.
I mean, at a level that I've never seen before. I was in disbelief for a month, because I'm like, this can't happen. Nobody's not recruiting in this industry. I mean, we're all not we.
And Pat Surtain's kid.
Oh, everybody.
Right.
I mean,
he's not like,
this is weird. Like, bro, you don't just stop.
#1 outside linebacker in the country was ready to make a commitment video for Florida State, and then just stopped hearing from him. I mean, it was everybody's a hired gun, and everybody operates under the assumption that you go in and you recruit for the logo on your polo until you stop being there. And that certainly did not take place in the final days or final year of Jimbo.
Justin Fields.
Yeah, it was a strange year too. They lost to Miami, had their quarterback get hurt, and then a hurricane came, and there was like a 17-day kind of just dead period there, where I think Jimbo just decided, you know what, I'm gonna take it somewhere else, and it was a year unlike any other.
It sounds like. Now, offensive line wise, we can kind of just move on to the OU side of things. What you guys and any questions you guys have for us, but offensive line wise. Yeah, it's not ideal when you don't have both of your starting offensive tackles and you're playing against guys like Verse. That's not exactly how you draw it up, but Tyler Guyton, I expect him to be he can play either. And I actually think from a physical tools standpoint, from a ceiling standpoint, he's got the highest ceiling of anyone that's in OU's offensive line room. I think if he can put it all together and have a great offseason this offseason, I think he's a first round, second round type guy. Like there's just not many people on the planet that have his measurables and move the way that he does. But the other tackle spot's going to be interesting, gentlemen, because it seems there are 2 options that I would say are most likely. One is Jacob Sexton, who's a true freshman. Everything I've been told about him, works hard, plays hard, cares. He's an Oklahoma guy, but he's a true freshman going against, potentially a first-round pick. I know this about Lebby, though. Lebby is not an idiot. If it is Sexton, he's not just going to have him on an island all day, clearly, and he's going to work around that stuff. But the other option is a guy named Aaron Parks, who during the spring, when some guys were out, he was actually working with the ones throughout spring ball and just didn't have a great training camp, and we haven't really seen him on the field at all. So the other options for OU at tackle are a true freshman or a guy who really has not played a significant snap at Oklahoma. So that's where we're at with that.
And thus, maybe now we know why Versus playing in this bowl game. Like, that probably helps your draft stock to if you can go out, if you can get a couple extra sacks there in the bowl game. That makes some sense. So you mentioned Levy, obviously, for Florida State fans. Dude was at UCF, then he was at Ole Miss. How would you describe what they're running? Because it's not like the pure Baylor Brile stuff, but there's certainly elements of it, right?
Well, yeah, I think you've seen a lot of guys from that camp kind of morph into the same style. You look at what Tennessee does. There's Arkansas is trying to do the same thing. Now, here's the difference, and this has been the problem with Oklahoma. Our backup quarterback situation is so bad that they had no trust at all in running the ball with the quarterback. The quarterback needs to be a big factor of the offense. And whenever we do it just once or twice a game, it was incredibly productive for us. But we all saw what happened whenever Dylan Gabriel went out, right? We got blanked by Texas. TCU ran us off the field the last 3 quarters whenever he was out. So they just couldn't afford for him to go down again. So that's been the biggest factor. Now, if, we've had a good recruiting class, we got a 5-star quarterback out of that.
You flipped Bowen yesterday.
Yeah, got Bowen.
What a weird sequence
wow.
there.
You want to
ended
talk
up
about
on the right side, but oh my gosh.
You want to talk about precedents that might be bothersome moving forward. If we have 3 commitments, 2 in the final 24 hours or whatever, that'll make people's Bud's job a whole lot of fun. Wait, he committed to us on signing day, but have we actually gotten
he did the hat ceremony and everything.
Yeah.
It was wild. It was wild. But, with Jackson Arnold, you feel like next year you hope your backup quarterback situation is going to be a little bit better and you're more comfortable using the quarterback in the run game. And that's really going to change the way people defend you. And, it's also, it's crazy to say, as good as Oklahoma has been at receiver, we just have not been very good this year, and our guys cannot beat tight, good man-to-man coverage, and it's left us incredibly limited offensively to where, we're just kind of left with tempo. Everyone's piled the box on us. Our offensive line they've been okay. They didn't go above and beyond by any means, but they were okay. But it just makes it incredibly difficult when everyone just piles right in on top of you and you can't separate, from coverage. So, but I think the biggest factor has been the lack of the ability to go to the quarterback run game.
That makes sense. I mean, got to account for numbers wise. That Gabriel, like post injury, he's bounced back decently, right?
Yeah, he's been good. He's had some weird stretches where the accuracy just disappears. Like he'll throw dime after dime after dime. And then all of a sudden for about a quarter or so, he just can't hit any throws. It's really strange. We're spoiled with the type of quarterback play that we've had over, the last several years, but it's just really bizarre to see. Like he'll throw a tremendous deep ball or tremendous deep out, and then he'll have an RPO slant just there in the middle of the field and just sail it by 8 yards. It's just like, wait, it's been a little strange.
He starts to miss a couple more until something happens and he steers it back on the road.
Yeah, but as far as bouncing back from that hit in the Tech game in that overtime, he's fine, but he got smoked.
Dude, okay. Yeah.
And the guy that smoked him just announced he's coming to Oklahoma, which is pretty funny.
All right. For those who aren't watching this, I was live betting this game, and I when I saw the lines were pretty much done by that point, but I still had it on. I was watching This kid is like got knocked out, or well, I guess knocked out once, right? Because he didn't get knocked out against Texas. It was held over from TCU, right?
Right.
Like they just threw it. Was like a throwback pass, right, to the quarterback.
First play of the overtime. Yeah.
Yeah.
Drake Stoops threw it to him, right? I think.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah.
A little too much air under that one.
What did he?
got
I mean,
floated.
he hung him out to dry. I was like, oh God, this is wow. So because I was talking on Cover 3 with Danny Cannell, and he's like, dude, this Gabriel kid, I saw him at this quarterback camp I was at. Like, he's got some real juice. You know, obviously Danny played for a long time in the NFL, and so I trust him when he's looking at quarterbacks. I was like he could definitely cook in that offense. You know, with Mims. I mean, Mims has been good, like numbers wise. So when you talk about the receivers, I assume it's mostly like the other guys. You can kind of put attention
I
on
include
Mims
in that.
Okay,
Mims has been surprisingly inconsistent especially compared to what we expected from him. He's had some stretches where he just can't catch the ball.
Walk-in touchdowns.
Yeah, like dropping touchdowns.
In tight games, like in games that we end up losing, like West Virginia, and it's been strange.
No,
didn't he drop Kansas State?
He's 1,000-yard guy, but it's been, he's had some head scratching performances. There's no doubt about it.
You guys have played some weird games down the stretch. Like that Oklahoma State game was like 28-0 immediately, and then I felt like Oklahoma's defense, until it got in the red zone, was just non-existent. And then in the red zone, it's like, hey, brick wall, here we go. That was just, I don't know, like if you're calling these games, it has to be kind of, you don't really know what's coming snap to snap. But I think that's probably like indicative of year one stuff, right? Like this staff still got to be learning about their roster.
Ted, you want to talk about the defense? I feel like that could be fun.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that's been shocking is the amount of just absolutely winnable games that we just fell apart. And it doesn't take anything big to win these games. They're layups, catch the wide open touchdown. What do we have? West Virginia, Gabe, what do we have? 2 touchdowns called back, right? 2 touchdowns called back because of just bonehead plays like that you don't even need to do. They're easy touchdowns. In defense, we've had moments of really good play followed by head scratching, can't get lined up, can't make a tackle as an unblocked player. So there's been these weird moments. Penalties have cost us. We're last in the conference in penalties. There's been some really frustrating points, but some of that's going to happen with as much inexperience as we had playing out there. I really hope that some of our guys are going to make some bigger strides this year than they did. But the way it unfolded was not pretty. And you got to credit some of the guys for sticking in there, and like we've got some guys that are going to be playing in the bowl game. It's just strictly a culture thing and how they want to be remembered. Like a Braden Willis guy who he's tight end. He has played out of his mind this year. And so there's some of those, you sprinkle in some of these guys that have had extraordinary seasons, even though it's 6-6, they've done the right things and they've set the right example moving forward. But, it's been one of those years where you look back at it, and I know some people, like, you can kind of do this with everyone, but it's like, should have won this one, should have won this one, should have won this one, should have won this one. It's wild. It's really something I've never seen before. Like, we found ways to lose these football games that were right there, and all you had to do is hit the layups.
I mean, to that end, like I do a lot of the power rankings and sports betting stuff on Cover 3 and elsewhere. Oklahoma is by far my highest rated 6-6 team. Like, there's really nobody else close. So
Yes.
it's like there
We're
are
number one. We're number one.
Like a down-to-down basis, that they do a lot of good things that don't necessarily always end up on the scoreboard, at the end of the ball game. But like, I think about them, like, if certain guys are back, if they're able to supplement with a portal, and like they could be pretty good next year, and maybe surprise some folks.
The thing about that, Bud, is you look around the conference, like, and not to get into a lengthy conversation about the 2023 Big 12 season, but
you feel pretty good about the refs in that season?
Oh my God.
We'll see. I am not one of the conspiracy theorists on that. That's more of Ted's lane. But you look at the teams in the top of the conference in the Big 12, like a lot of people are going to be losing a lot. I think of all the talent TCU is going to lose. You think of some of the key playmakers that Kansas State is going to lose. Even Texas, right, having to replace a bunch of that defensive line. I would assume Texas is going to be the favorite going into the season next year in the Big 12. But Oklahoma, if they're able to retain everyone that I think should be coming back and then plug some of those holes, like they should be right there in the conversation for the best team in the Big 12 next season, especially another year with some of these young guys on the defense feeling more comfortable in Venables' system. But that feels like it's forever away, boys. Forever away.
So
I think
on that Venables question.
Go
Go
ahead,
Ted.
No, you take it.
I mean, so obviously, like we've seen a lot of Venables being in this league for a long time, and that is that's never a defense that is fun to play when it's when it's looking good. How much of his stuff are they actually able to run? Because it's definitely not like they're not light on scheme. I feel like they throw it a lot at you when they're fully installed.
Well, they run a lot of it. I would say that they have a full install, and obviously you're going to pair some things. You're going to run some stuff more, as you look at what you do well and what you don't do well. But there's been so much inexcusable, like pre-snap problems that it's just frustrating for someone to watch. Have a hard time getting lined up a lot of the time. Adjustments to motions and shifts. There's you take, for instance, the game against Texas Tech. Like, we got a chance to win the football game, and we call a blitz. It's wide open, but one of the guys that's supposed to be blitzing, he just doesn't blitz. He's playing something else. Just doesn't have the call. Like, I don't even know how you line up without having the call, but he did it routinely. So there's stuff like that has been going on that is just like makes you want to slam your head into the table. But that's kind of what you get with inexperience, and it's been a grind for Venables installing this defense and coming from where he was, where it takes a while. He was there for 10 years, right, at Clemson, running the same system, like getting guys in. So like whenever you show up as a freshman, everyone on the team has been in it and they know it. Well, here, like, no one knows anything, right? So it's like it's the blind leading the blind out there. So I expect there to be a massive jump next year defensively. Like, you forget like more adding talent to it. If we were to take the same exact guys next year, I think we'd see quite a leap forward. Now, we're going to have a big improvement in talent as well. And I think, through the portal, they're going to add some guys, already have, you've got some guys that have been kind of waiting that, freshmen last year that I feel are going to try to rotate in and start to push for some of those other positions. I expect defensively for there to be quite a leap forward, but man, sometimes if you go back and you watch the film from this season, you think, how in the world are we ever going to play good defense? But it's there. It's there.
I guess last one for me on the defense. I mean, Ingram's probably got a couple. So Redmond is an opt-out in this one?
Correct. Not playing.
Okay. Without him, like, who's the dude? At times this year, like when Florida State has struggled offensively, and part of it obviously is if you don't have your left tackle, if your right tackle's dinged up and you're trying to figure out, like, do we play the hurt right tackle or do we play this third string kid? And Jordan couldn't run as effectively in some of these games. He was kind of gutting it out, and they were like a boxer needing to get to the corner with that bye week, and then post bye week, they're like, all right, everybody's a little fresher. Let's roll this thing. But who are some dudes that defensively pop for you on this team? It's like if they're going to pull off the win, and it's not 45-42, maybe it's 35-28, something like that. Like guys that make a difference for Oklahoma's defense for the bowl game.
So And Ted, I know Ted agrees with this, so I don't even have to ask him if he agrees. The guy who has flashed the most is Isaiah Coe, 94. He has been the most consistently disruptive interior lineman for them. He's been a better player than Redmond this season, in my opinion. He has had a larger impact on the interior of that offensive line. Now, it was what game did his thumb pop out of place? Is that K-State?
Ames.
Oh no, is that you're right? Was Colt? Yeah, so he was in the Iowa State game, his thumb popped out and broke through his skin. Actually, it's pretty gnarly.
Mhm.
And he's been playing with something on his, like a club on his hand since. I think that'll be off for this, so he should be a little more effective. But yeah, Co 94, Jordan Kelly 88 has had some nice flashes, but they don't have. I think when you look at the defense, like they just don't have. I mean, they don't have a Lovett. They just don't have a guy that looks like that.
Yeah.
You know, where you just look at him, you go, okay, that guy looks like an NFL interior defensive lineman. They don't have anybody that has those physical traits right now. Now they're working on it, right? They're working on it, but yeah, the interior of the defensive line, Ted, it has not been I wouldn't say it's been a huge weakness, but it certainly hasn't been a huge strength of this defense.
Well, it's, Venables, as good of a defensive coordinator as he is, and you've seen it show up, because our sack and tackle for loss numbers are really good, but it's all like scheme generated, right? With blitzing from different places, bringing guys off an edge late, and throwing a bunch of different fronts at you. We'll play bear, we'll play a true 3-man front, we'll play 4 down. We'll do all kinds of things throughout a game, and that's kind of how you get those big tackle for loss numbers. You create some confusion there on the offensive line, but Redmond is the most gifted defensive lineman we have, but he's maybe 3-4 times a game it's like the switch flips on and you can't block him, but the rest of the time he's it just kind of going through the motions. Yeah. Co is, as Gabe mentioned, he's the most consistent. When he plays low and comes off the ball with some good technique, you just absolutely can't move him out of there. And hopefully he's healthy and ready to go for the bowl game. Our edge guys have been, and maybe Gabe disagrees, but I think they've been a massive disappointment this year. They started off really well, and just from that point on, I think everyone, after we had a couple of bad games, everyone like really tightened up and was worried about making mistakes, and it just led to tentative play, soft play, and we could not get to the quarterback off the edge. The only way we could do it is by generating it off of game plan and scheme stuff. So that's been a disappointment, but we've got good, talented guys there. Like the couple of guys that we had starting on the edge, I feel like have a high ceiling, but for whatever reason this year, just like when it was the first 4 games, I was like, here we go. We're going to have some dudes now. And it just stopped. And I think they regressed from that point on. And, maybe they've had a chance to kind of sit back, reassess, get healthy, refocus, pair the game plan to what really works. And maybe over this long stretch, they can come out and play a good game.
You guys kind of covered all the questions that I had of the defense organically there in the course of conversation. I will just throw in one point as we talked about it there, flashing back to the Florida State side real quickly. Robert Cooper's a name that Oklahoma fans might want to look for, a guy that's been injured all year, but it's a final game opportunity for him to make a splash. Big body defensive tackle, never a guy that's he's not like a disruptor, but a guy that could be a pretty solid player and will be the other starting defensive tackle opposite of Fabian Lovett there.
He's 91, right?
He's 91. Big boy. Yeah.
Yeah. He, we don't have any guys that look like him.
But fire hydrant type that. And he's also just like, is he going to be an NFL guy? No. Is he class of 2016, I think? Right. So he's like a 23-year-old guy who's like 315, last game, gonna want to go
strong
out.
as hell.
Yeah,
Been in a
exactly.
legit strength and conditioning program for that long. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
That's the kind of guys that you need. And that's the thing that we just haven't had is we don't have any guys that have been in there, been long-time consistent players. We're just so young across the board defensively.
That makes a lot of sense. I know Norvell's probably really excited to get another crack at Venables because last year when they played, that was a tough watch up there in Clemson. They hit one explosive play on this pretty creative little wheel route thing they ran, and it still involved Toe
Philly.
Toe Philly, yeah.
Rolling over the defender for an
making a
extra
ridiculous
25
catch
yards.
and like landing on his back on top of the defender and rolling off and going 91 yards. Like, okay, that's kind of the entirety of the yards for today, guys. now to recap,
we got you on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Y'all want to do some predictions real quickly, or anything?
Do whatever
like that?
you guys want to do, man.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, let's roll through our prize picks real fast, even though prize picks are not available yet for this game because we are recording this early on, so y'all can listen to it over your Christmas holiday travel. If you want, prizepicks.com, promo code Nolecast gets you 100% match up to $100 for first-time depositors. We have any NFL props that we like this weekend, player props? Ingrid, we don't have a free square this weekend yet, right?
Not that I'm aware of. I will check on that.
In the spirit of Christmas, I hope that Prize Picks will drop a free square for us because my NFL picks have not been great. Of course, this is for entertainment purposes only, gamble responsibility, etc. Joe Burrow is my fantasy team. I play one team with my neighborhood league, and I am in first. So I'm gonna ride with Joe Burrow over 260 passing yards against New England. I don't think Belichick's gonna let him run in bad weather, and I trust Burrow and Chase to hook it up there through the air. Angry, we got any Falcons picks? Or do you guys have an NFL team that you still pull for?
Teddy, how are your Patriots doing, man?
It's been interesting. After last week, I don't even know what to think anymore. I've never seen anything like that in my life. I don't know how you show up and after getting stiff-armed in the face directly to the ground like a toddler, can you take another snap at quarterback in the NFL if you're Mac Jones? I don't know. There's
a couple people who could perhaps reconsider their NFL career based off actions and decisions made on that play alone.
What are we doing? We're supposed to be like the smartest team in the NFL, and that's how we win games. And I don't know what happened there, boys. But I don't know. The Patriots, we're going to be a bit of a work in progress. So, unfortunately,
I would say one game I do think that's really interesting in the NFL slate this weekend, Dallas and Philly, right? No Jalen Hurts. Now, I think Gardner Minshew's one of the better backups in the league, but even though he's got some mobility, no doubt, Hurts's legs, especially down in the red zone, have been such a large part of that Philadelphia offense. I just don't know. I don't know what necessarily it's going to look like offensively for them. So, and especially against Dallas's defense, one of the best defenses in the league when you look at DVOA and all those metrics. I don't know. I feel like that's a really tough spot for Philly, and it's almost one of those ones where you could see him maybe just taking a sigh of relief and being like, all right, hey, we don't have a quarterback, but there's a lot of really good leadership on that Philadelphia team. So I don't know, but I think that out of the entire slate, that's the most interesting game for me.
I could definitely see Minshew like having to take it through the air quite a bit, I guess, because Dallas.
Yeah, so maybe take the over on Minshew passing yards.
I could see that. Yeah, betting over on the backup.
On the
quick shout out to
on the college slate, just real quickly, the game that I like the most is TCU and Michigan. I think that's a reasonably decent matchup that you're going to get some form of competition that is held similar to regular season performance. That's the other thing in these bowl games where it can be tough to kind of try to figure out where to go there. I do like Ronnie Bell's fantasy number. Also like Donovan Edwards' fantasy number from a Prize Picks perspective, if you want to take a look at that.
I like Max Duggan. I'm looking at it 245.5 for passing yards. I like the over on that.
Mm-hmm.
The skill position guys that they're going to throw at Michigan, it's nothing that they've – see, I mean, Ohio State has some great guys, but Quentin Johnston at 6'4", Savion Williams at 6'6". They got a 6'9" tight end that they throw to over the middle. Darius Davis in the slot, one of the fastest guys in college football, and they pair that with a great running game and the quarterback run game as well. That you get the full gamut of offense there. I think, I don't know that they're going to be able to hold up against Michigan, in that heavy run game. They may not. It may be one of those limited possession type of games, but I feel like TCU is going to be able to score some points.
I can see that. As the originator of TCU 28-1 this offseason, I did have to hedge it with Kansas State because I didn't really like. I was like, Kansas State looks like the better team, just after watching 12 games of each. But like, TCU's got dudes on the outside. They really do. I like that hire he made too, a D coordinator. Like Joe Gillespie is somebody, dude. He was a beast at Tulsa.
Oh yeah,
like every year, Tulsa's defense is kind of much better than their talent score says they should be.
Well, TCU gave it, I think we talked about this. They got way better from where they were to start off the year. It was just kind of like, let's see if we can get a stop here or there, to where they are, how they were playing towards the end of the year. They made some big improvement.
And they've got what a lot of people may not realize. And I know Michigan, Joe Moore Award winner again, arguably the best O-line in the country. Even without Blake Corum, that run game has continued to just roll. But TCU's got some size across that defensive front. Now they play that 3-3-5, and now they've gotten a little more complex with it as the season has progressed. They've added more and more, but Dylan Horton, the freshman nose guard, is huge. I mean, they got size and length at the point of attack, and I like their linebacking core. I think it's going to be.
They are violent.
Jaboy Hodges,
backup quarterback ready, Michigan.
Watch it. Keep your head on a swivel, JJ McCarthy. Keep it
the
on
backup
a swivel.
Transferred to Iowa already.
Yeah, McNamara's gone. But now, do we need to do anything else? Because I got one more thing.
No, that's great.
Quick Merry Christmas to our sponsors, Tarpon Sellers, Tarpon Sellers, Legendary Home Loans, Congruity HR. Are we missing anything? Oh, Charlie Park. If you guys are in town for graduation or maybe moving your kids in to Tallahassee, make sure you hit up brunch at Charlie Park.
Well, there we go. Now, we went all this time without addressing the fact that Teddy called you an idiot, and then OU's fan base. From what I can, just knowing what I know about OU fans, and especially OU Twitter, I'm assuming that led to a steady stream of Twitter hate that you received. I just want to know, how was that experience?
It was interesting. So, like, the ones that at least made it funny, I kept, and the ones that were just obnoxious, like if you were tweeting me about it 10 to 12 times a day, I did go ahead and mute you. But like some of the folks are pretty funny and had some fun with it. I was like, all right, like you guys can stay. I didn't really want like block anybody, maybe block one guy. I got kind
Bud
of
is bred from the fires of Florida State Twitter, the most psychopathic fan base on social media perhaps out there. I'm sure
still.
Yeah, exactly. He's seen a thing or two.
He was born in the darkness, molded by it.
For the folks who are like Nolecast listeners or Oklahoma Breakdown who don't listen to Cover 3, we were like having a discussion about the conference realignment stuff, right? And I had made the comment, like, if you take the check, meaning you take the bigger check to go to the bigger league, you also take the losses. Go ask Maryland. And I did not mean to say that Oklahoma was going to turn into Maryland, but just that, like, math-wise, you are going to lose more ball games in a new league because you're playing a better quality of opponent on a week-to-week basis. But I didn't say it very well, and so it was like it just spread like fire. And this one guy took it and clipped it and was like, "Look at Bud Elliott saying Oklahoma's going to turn into Maryland. This is definitely going to go viral." It was awesome.
Yeah, we've
got. It did not click.
Army.
Like I know who Teddy Lehman is, and it did not click at the time. I was like, "Who is Teddy Lehman?" And it's like, "Oh, okay." Now, so I'm going to get like a double idiot call out for saying I didn't know who Teddy Lehman was.
You don't know ball, bro.
Yeah, well, it's with the Lincoln Riley deal, it engaged Oklahoma Twitter to a level we've never seen before.
I had noticed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like it's almost like a plague of locusts that can be sent one direction or another on a whim. And it's just, it's an overwhelming group that just, they attack. It's been fun to watch on our side, probably not for the others out there.
I was thinking like nobody was more annoyed with USC's ridiculous turnover luck, and it was luck, than Oklahoma fans, right? Because like that could easily have been like a 7-5 team this year if they just don't get every single fumble break in the world up until the final ball game there. I mean, like, I think if you're an Oklahoma fan, you got to be encouraged by the recruiting class. I saw the Arnold kid Elite 11. He could play like that. I think he could probably play early. I mean, he played a lot of high quality ball there in Texas. I mean, just
as I mentioned, like the fact you feel good about him just if at backup is going to be a game changer for Oklahoma, because we as soon as they got on campus and they started spring ball last year, it was like, oh my God, we have a backup quarterback problem. And they tried to address it, but they just, by that point, everyone was already taken in the portal. And it's hard to get someone in the portal when you've got an established starter.
Oh, for sure. I mean, like one of the most savvy moves made this year was Troy going and getting Deggy, who lost the starting job at Western Kentucky. And like, I mean, not a good player, but like doesn't kill you if you have to play him, for a game or two. It is hard to get somebody like that who has enough juice. I think the better team you are, the harder it is to go and get a backup who's cool being a backup, because there's like a certain minimum level of talent you got to get on the roster, So are you guys stoked to be going to the SEC?
Yeah. I mean, seems like 2024 is most likely. I can understand why people are concerned after a 6-6 year one, but I think that being there is going to lead to it'll lead to another bump in recruiting, because I mean, Bud, covering recruiting as close as you do, like kids want to play in that conference.
Yeah.
And there's this divide, right, between the SEC, kind of the Big Ten, and everyone else, and how that gap seems to be getting wider. So I think it'll help recruiting, but yeah, there's certainly going to be some more losses, right? It's just I think that's natural to assume, but they have to continue to get bigger and better at the line of scrimmage heading into that league, because there's just some different body types, especially along the defensive lines, that you don't see here in the Big 12. You just don't. So
that makes sense. Also, like, if you're an Oklahoma fan worried about it, I would say, like, in the modeling that I do, the bottom of the Big 12 this year was really not bad. And I actually think the bottom of the Big 12 was better than a lot of these SEC teams that you're going to play. Ole Miss is favored over Texas Tech. I didn't think Texas Tech was that bad. I mean, they had to play 3 quarterbacks due to injury, but I mean, that's not a bad team. Like, they're not great, but I don't know why Ole Miss is considered that much. And maybe I'll look like an idiot here if Ole Miss blows them out. They might, because the Wilson kid opted out, I know, for Texas Tech. But I think the difference is more like at the very top of the league. The best team or best 2 teams, and Georgia just has like nobody's dudes right now look like Georgia's.
Well, they've essentially been 1-2 in recruiting for the last 5-6 years. I mean, it's hard to.
Saban took 27 guys, and the only non 4 or 5-star was the kicker.
Yeah, I saw that. It's insane. Like, they've got more 5 stars on their roster than most teams have ever had in recruiting with the history of their program.
And like, they just, at a certain point as well, like, you kind of know your roster's good if you look at the portal and you're like, nobody can really help us. Georgia didn't take a single transfer last year.
Terrifying. Terrifying.
So,
well,
awesome, man.
Bud, this has been great. Look forward to seeing you at the game. And the one piece of advice, like, if you just want to, and we will take credit for boosting the cover 3 numbers, because I imagine the OU hate led to more people listening, and then they realized it's an awesome podcast. I'm a frequent listener. Think you guys do an awesome job. But if you just want to go ahead, because I think Maryland went 7-5. If you just want to really lean into that, if you just want to put a screenshot out of Maryland 7-5 and next to OU 6-6, and just say something like, "Oh, sorry, I was wrong."
Sorry.
or something.
That
like,
will definitely boost
they,
the game.
maybe something like, oh, you maybe next year they can get to Maryland's level or something like that. If you really want to burn this thing to the ground, that's the way to do it, man.
Big Game Boomer will have like a new ranked list of like the top 50 times Bud Elliott was wrong. It'll be...
This is great, man.
Definitely.
Hey, thanks for the time, and hopefully we get a good game.
I'm looking forward to it, man. At least you guys get a little warmer weather.
Whew,
Yeah,
it'd be nice.
it's like 0 degrees here right now. So
It's 64. So
Nice.
must be nice. All right, man. Thanks.
see you guys.